I think y'all are missing Mr. Scruggs, aren't you? I don't see him anywhere.
I talked to his wife today and him. He did not say he wasn't coming.
All right, we're live and ready to go.
Okay, thanks everybody for taking your time to join us today. I'll call this meeting of the Covington Planning Commission to order. And Jennifer, we need a roll call vote, please. I mean, roll call attendance.
Chairman Robertson,
Here?
Mr. Lamb,
Here.
Mr. Morgan,
Here.
Mr. Scruggs, Mr. Shawver,
Here.
Mr. Wickline,
Here.
Mr. Wilson.
Here.
Okay, thank you. And obviously, we do have a quorum. I will read the electronic meeting script now to get this officially started. We're holding this meeting electronically so as to conduct necessary city business. We are eligible to hold this meeting because I, as chair to the planning commissioner, find that one, the governor has declared a statewide emergency under section 44-146-17 of the Code of Virginia. Two, the catastrophic nature of the emergency makes it impractical or unsafe to assemble a quorum in a single location. And three, the meeting is necessary or statutorily required in order to carry out the commission's responsibilities. I would now hear a motion to find that the nature of this emergency makes it impractical or unsafe for us to assemble a quorum at a single location, and that the purpose of this meeting is to carry out the necessary responsibilities of the commission. Have a motion.
So move.
Second?
Second.
Okay, we need a roll call vote for this, please.
Mr. Lamb,
Here.
Mr. Morgan,
Here, you're on mute. Yep. Sorry.
thanks. Mr. Shawver,
Four.
Mr. Wilson,
Four.
Chairman Robertson.
Or. Okay, Tommy, do you need to convene the city council now?
I need to call Covington City Council to order. Ms. Scott, would you show that everybody, and we too have to read the statement about COVID-19 since the coronavirus health emergency and pursuant to chapters 1283 of the 2020 Act of Assembly, Covington City Council will convene electronically to transact the business statutorily required or necessary to continue operations of the city. And that's all we need to do, I think.
Okay, thank you. Our next agenda item is the reading and approval of planning commission minutes for the meeting held on January 18th, that should be 2021, right?
Yes.
Any comments on the minutes? They looked fine to me.
I ask for approval as is.
We have a motion, we have a second.
Second.
All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Against nay, the ayes have it. Next agenda item, a joint public hearing to entertain the rezoning request of PC Mini Storage, J. Frank Hepler, President, from R3 to C2. Is described as 0000 East Holly Street, CIC, plot lot 12, block 19, tax map number 18-119-12. Mr. Hepler, you are here. I saw you somewhere. Yeah, there you are. You want to tell us what's going on here, Frank? please.
Yes, my son Mark is with me also. We're hoping to rezone this so we can expand our present business, which is across the street from this lot.
I'm assuming you own this lot, right?
Yes,
What are your plans for it?
basically, we're just planning on expanding what we have across the street. Probably, we have to tear down the existing office building, so we're not sure if we're going to build an office across the street or tear that down and tear the existing office down and build more units. And basically, it'll be very similar to what we have there now.
Okay. And it's zoned R3 right now. What is the lot beside it zoned? Still R3, Eric?
Yes, sir. The adjacent lots on that side of the street are R3 until you reach the commercial lots where the Napa is housed, adjacent to Highland.
Okay. All right, I will now open a public hearing where we will entertain comments from the public for or against. I will ask Jennifer first if we have any phone calls or other correspondence emails about this case.
The only one, well, I saw them on here a minute ago and Miss Scott received it, but I don't see them now. Anyway, they just asked to join the meeting, but they were on and now they're gone.
Oh, they're there.
We're here.
Oh, okay, sorry, I couldn't see you. You're not showing up on my screen now.
Okay.
That's it. They just asked to join, so we've sent them the link and they're actively here.
Okay, who are we talking with?
My name's Mike Silvery, and I own the house at 106 Holly Street.
And Mr. Silvery, where is that in relation to the lot in question?
I'm assuming it's the empty lot, the vacant lot that's right next door to my house there.
Okay. And would you like to speak for or against, or do you have questions, or?
We have a question.
Yeah, we have questions.
Okay.
Okay, if in fact that property is made commercial, what does it do to the other lots? Because I want to know whether or not we can rebuild on that lot that 106 Holly Street sits at to original footprint if we decide to put a new home in it at some other point. Are we stuck with a commercial property at that point? I don't know what it's going to do to the 106 address.
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
No.
Then we're good.
Okay, if it's not going to affect the house there, I'm fine with what he wants to do with the lot next door.
Yeah, the only thing that we're here to discuss is that particular lot. And that's all he can speak for, and that's all we're going to act on. So
Okay.
It won't change your lot at all.
Then we're fine.
I'm fine then.
Okay. Anybody else, Jennifer?
No, we don't have anything else.
Okay. Well, having said that, we will close the public hearing and move on to questions, comments, and discussion with my group. I don't know if you folks had a chance to go by there and look at the lot. I did, and actually when I went by there, Mr. Hepler was down there, so he pointed out to me the lot, so I knew for sure which one it was, and we talked about what his plans were and what his thoughts were, and based on where it is and the type of business that he has, it looks like it makes sense to me.
Mr. Chairman, the only question I had was what the individual just a moment ago asked. And so that satisfied my thoughts.
Okay, great. Anybody else have any questions, comments, thoughts for Mr. Hepler?
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, just want to convey, looking at the comprehensive plan, that area is designated as a transitional area. And what that means is generally it's viewed that in the future, it'll be moving toward more commercial uses and less residential. So the comp plan does support this type of zoning in that area.
Yeah, I looked at that as well, Eric. And it's marked general commercial under future land use. And I think that it's going to be, you know, as it transitions, if it transitions, I think it certainly fits.
Yeah, I believe it does. It's marked, I believe we could almost argue the color coding here, but it's not, either way, it's considered to be heading that direction.
Okay. Anybody else?
Council, got anything?
I do.
All right,
Question. What do we mean is transition towards commercial?
Good question.
Long as them houses are there, it can't turn to commercial, can it?
It can if council chooses to change it. So council is the one that always has to affect a zoning change because it's affecting an ordinance. So if I can read what the comp plan designates transitional mixed use, I'm gonna quote right from the comp plan. There are numerous areas that contain a mix of residential, commercial, and small industrial uses. This mix of uses creates a unique dynamic that warrants its own use classification. The intent of this designation is to identify those areas that should be allowed to transition to higher intensity uses over time. Specifically, the city should seek to encourage residential uses to transition to compatible service, retail, and low intensity, low impact industrial uses.
And Mr. Hunter, to also clarify, I think one of the things that we've been working towards as a city, and I think that you all as a council should work on kind of fleshing out and developing further, is really looking at what will be our business district. As you all know, we kind of have a fragmented, decentralized business district. And I do believe in a nutshell, essentially, that's what the comp plan is sort of recommending, that, you know, we start looking at it in a strategic approach, not that, you know, in your residential area, you've got one pop-up business and then, you know, 15 other homes. So this is really an opportunity, you know, using the comp plan to look at where do we want to look at expanding the business district beyond the main corridor on Durant and Monroe. Sorry, not Monroe, it's Hawthorne. Yeah, no, it is Monroe. And from our downtown area immediately. Sorry, you know I'm directionally challenged, Mr. Mayor.
I know.
I try.
But in this case, Crystal, I think this fits pretty nicely. You know, it's low impact. There's not a lot of traffic. There's not a lot of lights or noise pollution. It's a very passive kind of use, and I think it fits just fine.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So if no one has any further discussion, I'd entertain a motion.
I make a motion that we move to rezone the property. Rezoning request of PC Mini Storage Incorporated, J. Frank Hepler, president, from R3 to C2. The lot is described as 00000 East Holly Street, CIC PT Lot 12, Block 19, comma, tax map number 18-119-12.
Okay, we have a request on the floor. Do we have, a motion on the floor? Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Let's have a roll call, please, Jennifer.
Mr. Lamb,
4,
Mr. Morgan,
4,
Mr. Shawver,
4,
Mr. Wickline,
4,
Mr. Wilson,
4.
Chairman Robertson.
4. So the motion passes, and our job, Frank, is to recommend to city council, and we do recommend that they approve your zoning request. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you. We really appreciate your consideration.
Thank you, everybody.
So, Frank, what'll happen next is it'll go to city council next month to be on our agenda. And then city council will, but we're here today to hear the public hearing. So we'll address it at our next regular meeting, which is the second Tuesday in February. March.
Okay. Thank you very much. Do we need to be there? Or
You don't have to be. You're more than welcome to come.
okay, that's fine. Just
Yeah, this counts as the public hearing today, so public hearing's over with.
okay, great. And we thank you all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Tad, I don't think council has any other business. I think we can entertain a motion to adjourn.
Yeah, I
Mr.
agree.
Mayor, move for adjournment for city council.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We'll be leaving you now.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for
Everybody
calling
be
in.
safe.
We got a little bit more business to do. Okay, next on our agenda is, as you see, unfinished business. Eric, we need to talk about the Central Business District.
Out of respect for everyone's time, I would recommend that we skip that one today because we've got these two other ordinances that council has asked us to look at, and they're quite big. I don't think we can get through all this in one meeting. So I would rather we just start with the existing ordinances. And then if we have time, if time allows, go back to that one, if that's all right, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Jennifer, note that for our next meeting, please.
Absolutely.
So we'll table that. And we'll move on to the proposed ordinance revisions. First, we'll look at ordinance 0-20-13 Appendix A on subdivisions.
So if everyone had a chance to review these documents, I'd either take a recommendation that we go page by page, or if you just want to address specific questions related to your review, I'm happy either way.
Mr. Chairman, I would certainly entertain the thought that we just ask if there are any questions as opposed to going page by page.
Yeah, that would be much less painful.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I may, just as a quick preface, one of the reasons that you will see these two ordinances and several more to come is last year, actually late 2019 and throughout 2020, we embarked on a city code review process. And so we've been trying to work through and update what we have on the books as far as what we're currently practicing or what needs to be revisited as best practices. And one of the areas that is of heavy lifting for kind of revamping and making the process smoother and much more clear is things that fall between permitting, zoning, and anything that is in the planning realm. So just as a quick background. So these two that Mr. Tyree just referenced, they have been reviewed by our city attorney, and they've also been reviewed by council.
They've been reviewed in the state they're in with these markups?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Eric, you have anything to add?
No, Ms. O'Nitis did a good job. It's really, we're just trying to get in line with best practices that are recognized nationwide much more than what's here. There was some language throughout both of these ordinances that was out of date or not in full compliance with existing state code as it is today, There are a few areas where I requested that we make a change because it made more sense related to best practices nationwide. If everyone reviewed it, they would probably see, things where we removed some requirements for bonds because the programs that deal with erosion and sediment and language that the state already has back in some instances, but it's all dealing with the sub. And so I'm just trying to get us a little control and plan development if we have that occur again.
Okay. So I guess we'll just grab hands here and walk through this thing. Did anybody have anything on what I will call the first page here?
I was just curious why we deleted the description for setbacks.
I was too, Steve, and I read through it. I think it's picked back up here at 6-2.1. See if you concur with that.
We were doing a
Made a note.
definitions page, so I didn't know if we keep it there or not.
There was a lot of redundancy, and we tried to eliminate that when there was redundancy also. And and you have to remember we did this about a year ago, so my memory's not quite as keen on it as it was when we first did it. But I do remember we were going through it page by page, section by section. This is pre-COVID. Mark and I were sitting across the table from each other, and everywhere we recognized redundancy, we tried to remove it.
I just think that if you have a definition section, kind of have that table with all of whatever you're going to define later on in that same place. It's just a thought.
Okay.
I don't think it matters one way or another, but.
Well, with respect to that, Eric, will the definition of setback be called out somewhere else in the code?
I believe it does, and I'll have to look through to find that for you, but I'm writing notes on all the questions.
I did see it later on.
I meant in another section of the code. This is just one section.
It may have been in Appendix B where I saw it.
Well, where I saw it, like I said, was over here in 6-2.1 under standards and regulations. And that maybe this is what you're talking about, does reference Appendix B.
Yeah, and I believe specifically with this one, setbacks is more of a function of zoning and less a function of subdivision of land. And that is probably why we took that definition out of the subdivision ordinance, because it's defined in the zoning ordinance and it's a function of zoning.
And that's what I'm referring to. We have it in our definitions as well. Okay, anything else on page 1? How about page 2? Page 3? How about 4?
I just had a question since I'm new to this and was just under section 3 administration, where we took out the except as provided, except as such powers that are expressly delegated, that little section there that was removed. I agree the council, our elected officials, should make the final decision. I just wondered if there was any powers that had been delegated to this point that would be sent back to council.
So everything in the code is sent back to council. Planning commission in general is a recommendation type body, and all the enforcement or the approval process is actually powers live with city council. So that's why that was stricken out, because it just clarifies that the council is the one with the final decision. And there never would be any confusion then on the applicant's side about who was the one with the decision-making powers.
Yeah, I actually, Mike, had a note in my margin here, eliminating redundancy. And I think that's what it's doing.
All right. It also specifies agents in there. Would there be anything there, Eric, that you would no longer be able to make a decision on that would have to go to council?
No, not particularly. The subdivision ordinance, you got to remember, this is for subdivision. So the subdivision of land, the only thing that I'm really vested with the power to do is to split one lot into two parcels. If you're going to divide any more than that, then it requires going through the process that's laid out in the ordinance, or I can recombine an unlimited amount of lots into a larger parcel. So those are really the only things that I'm able to do under the subdivision ordinance that doesn't go through an extensive review and approval process. So yeah, there's nothing really that affects me there.
All right. Thank you. Like I say, this is a learning experience.
It's no problem. Anytime.
I appreciate it. The more questions you ask, the more you learn. Anything else on that page? How about the next page? All right, we'll move on to section 6. Anything, I'll call it out as section 6. Anything in section 6? I had a question, Eric, on 6.8. And my question in my margin was, does UR fit in the subdivision ordinance?
So not really. UR is the zoning district. And so it really shouldn't be in here. And I think that's why we struck a part of this out. But this is the section that deals with private roads and private streets. And this is what that brings us to coming more in line with generally recognized standards in urban areas. In urban areas, it's generally, the development process generally is that the developer develops the infrastructure, the streets and everything to a certain standard that's acceptable for inclusion into the public system. And then the public system adopts those after they're at that state. So what this one, the way it's currently worded and what I'm recommending we strike out, it allows for private roadways that don't necessarily meet those development standards to be done. And so it causes issues because then you don't have the same service and utilities throughout the city provided to these private areas. And so it's not a common way to do urban development. And I'm just trying to get us a little bit more in line with what's the common best practice, recognized best practice.
Okay. All right, moving on past 6, or moving on in 6-8. 6-8.2. I guess I was putting a note to myself about streets. And I guess that falls back to the predetermined plat.
Yeah, so
Right.
it does, it goes, and so you're talking about the development of streets, 6.8 dash, which subsection are you on, Tad?
2.
2. So private streets streets shall be allowed, okay. And so this is really the section I was referring to there, that most of this whole section deals with is private streets and the paving and the water and sewer service in these areas. And so, like I said, if it's a private street and it's not developed to standards, then it's never adopted into the city's system. And that causes confusion for people moving to the area because they don't have the same access to services that we offer throughout the rest of the city. They don't get snow removal. They don't get city water necessarily. They don't have access to the public sewer system because the infrastructure never gets developed totally. And I'm not saying that it's right or it's wrong. It's just this being in our ordinance is something I would expect more to see in a rural area, not an urban area. And so I'm just trying to get us more in line with an urban development practice.
All right. Anything else in section 6 before we move to 7? All right, section 7-2 preliminary sketch. This implies that it is not required. Is that right?
That's correct. The preliminary sketch is not required. They're required to do a submittal that has a final and sketch and everything, but the preliminary one is not a requirement. They can do it. It eases the way for the designer is what it's meant to be. So the designer that's doing the subdivision of land, he has to deal with, in today's world, he has to deal with stormwater controls. He has to deal with a whole lot of things. And then he's trying to figure out how to fit the building sites onto the property that make them conducive for building. You actually, in today's world, have to design pretty much the stormwater controls first. And so a preliminary plat is something that we're saying it's a tool for you to use as a developer, as a guidance document that we can review it, we can comment on it, we can help guide you along the way to what works. But it's not a requirement. You can just go and have a site plan drawn up, do a submittal just the way that's described in the code, and then we tear it all apart, and then you go back and you pay your engineer or architect to do it all again if we didn't like it and it didn't get approved. So,
but under the same token, Eric, it looked like to me that if I was going to develop a undeveloped piece of land, I would want to come to the city and say, here's what I'm thinking. Are you guys good with it? Before I pay, the hydraulic engineer and civil engineers to do all the layouts and all that stuff. But we're not going to require that. So they're taking the risk of that.
Absolutely. Yep, they are. And you hit the nail on the head. It's meant to be, we're saying that you can do it and that we allow for it. You don't have to give us a finalized document, but we're happy to look at and review and comment on a preliminary plan, basically.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure. We're doing what we want to do. Anything else in section 7? Anybody else? Let me catch up on my notes here just a second. I see that you've got a 5-year limit on the plats.
Yep. And the reason for that is stormwater again. So stormwater is closely tied with land development nowadays. And the way that those regulations and state code run, they're basically on a 5-year cycle. If you let it go more than 5 years, then your stormwater plan becomes invalid. And that's the reason why I actually chose that 5-year time limit, was to keep things in line where we didn't have an approved subdivision plat that's life extended beyond its stormwater permit for it to be built out. They have to renew it every 5 years. It has to meet the standard. If DEQ changes the standard, then they have to redesign and come to the higher standard if they haven't built it out within that time limit. And that's the reason for that.
Okay. We jumped from 6 months to 5 years. That's pretty demonstrative to do something like that. And what I was thinking about was our group and the turnover that we have in 5 years. You look at who's looking back at me right now. There's several people here that haven't been here 5 months, and all of a sudden they're going to be asked to act on something that they had no background in. So that's kind of where I was thinking.
Okay. Yeah. And like I said, everything that I've put in here was just a recommendation. If y'all are more comfortable with 6 months, but In today's world with so much regulatory requirements, I think 6 months is too short.
I would be more in favor of like a 3-year, 36-month kind of thing. What do y'all think? You agree? Anybody listening?
Yeah, the
Yes.
only thing there is if they put their money into the design and as slow as things progress, you know, they could run out of their time before the 3 years was up.
Why couldn't they reapply for another 3 years?
As long as the code didn't change on them.
Yeah, that's what
That's
Steve
3
is
years.
saying. If somebody's changed something along the way, then
Understood.
And another concern of mine was phases of planned development. So some large subdivision plots, let's say if you had 100-acre plot of land and you did a phase development of that land, it may actually take many, many years to build that out. And so what they would do in that phase development or a planned unit of development, they call them PUDs in the business. In that PUD, you would develop the stormwater controls for the whole entire 100 acres, but you may only build that thing out 5 acres at a time. And so your goal is to try to put the stormwater controls in. They're done within the first section of years, but then you do the actual building on the subdivided parcels for years and years and years to come.
okay. Well, what do you think? What do you think, Steve?
It's more of a financial thing to the developer.
Yeah. I have a question as well, and sorry, this is probably for Eric. I'm just wanting to make sure that we're kind of remaining in line with the, just the basics of the state requirements. And this is 2 reasons. One, the financial requirements and wanting to make sure that we don't put undue barriers in place when we're trying to focus on growth and retention. And then secondly, recognizing that from a stormwater perspective and then the overall inspection processes that development services already oversees, they're stretched thin. So wanting to make sure that we're being mindful of that from a bandwidth piece as well.
And that's a good point. Eric, what is the state and/or industry standard?
So the state standards really revolve around that stormwater number I was talking about of 5 years. That's the threshold that is the one that really makes it hard for developers to plan very large subdivisions. So, and I think 5 years is a reasonable number considering the planned unit of development process that a lot of pieces of land are going through in today's world. 5 years is not a long time for a multi-million-dollar project like that to get built out. So let's take an example of like the Daleville Town Center down in Botetourt. Everybody's familiar with that area. They started construction on that thing probably 7 or 8 years ago when the first buildings went in, maybe a little longer, and it's still being built out today. So you have to kind of keep those things in mind, that these are large, long-term projects, and they take a lot of work and a lot of time putting together the pieces for the developer. And so in some instances, one section funds the next development section.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's important that we do try to stay in line with what makes it easy for the developer. And I think the 5-year limit does that, because that's when the state regulatory agencies are going to come in and go, your permit's expired, you have to be done, or he's going to be forced to go to the next standard that they develop. And all of that's related to the Clean Water Act. And so those federal regulations rolling downhill, they're not going to get any less restrictive. They're going to get more restrictive, if anything. So I think 5 years is probably the best limit we can offer a developer.
All right, Steve, you good with that?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
All right, well, we'll leave it at that. Thank you. Okay, moving over to section 8. Which looks like you are proposing that we strike it all the way down to 8-5.
Yeah, I believe all this was due to redundancies again.
Okay, that was my question. Okay, so anybody else got any other comments on the subdivision stuff? We've gone through that. All righty. Let's.
Mr. Robertson,
Ma'am.
just want to let everybody know that I got an email from Mr. Scruggs that says he's been there for the entire meeting since it began and he could see and hear everyone. And he voted for the regards to Mr. Hepler and that he has left the meeting. So I've asked for his vote on the minutes and the electronic meeting as well. So he has left, but just wanted y'all to know he was present.
I guess, Tom, is that something we can try to rectify before next time, get Wayne straightened out and get Mr. Scruggs straightened out?
Yeah, that's fine. Mr. Scruggs never reached out and said that he didn't get the correct link, so.
Okay, Jennifer, let him know that resource is out there for him.
Okay, will do. I actually talked to him today and he said he had the link and was ready to go. So I'm not sure what the conflict was, but I will talk to him and find out.
He must have ended up using the public link and not the link that came from Zoom directly to him. Because if he was on here, he was under the attendees.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I'll reach out to him and clarify that.
All right.
And it looks like Wayne got in.
Like he got out of his car anyway.
He's not in his car anymore.
Yeah, you got cold out there.
Are y'all okay with me recording Mr. Scruggs's votes, even though he couldn't communicate?
So Jennifer, I'm not sure that we can do that if he wasn't in.
You can, as long as you have a way of formally documenting it. We've had to do that with the schools committee or anything like that. As long as there's a way where there's some kind of documentation, whether it's he raised his hand in the Zoom as an audience member, or he sent you an email, or he sent the chairman, anyone, some kind of text, anything, any kind of electronic communication, since we are under the emergency provisions, sorry. Just because we've run into that in some of our committee meetings with other stuff.
Okay, well, he sent me an email and I asked the other two votes as well in an email, so I'll document that in the minutes.
Yeah, make those emails part of the record. And we'll be all right.
Will do, thank you.
All right, so moving on to this other ordinance that's before us. Ordinance 20-14. I guess we'll meander through it the way we did last time. Starting with section 2 of Article 1. Any comments there? Or section 3. And then looks like you guys jump in here and we'll get on through it. Article looks like 6, 11, 13. 13 is the floodplain districts as we start on page 2. Any comments in there? I guess.
And I'd like to kind of point out one change there. So if you look at Article 6, Section 1, it's referring to residential district R3. I think it's important everybody notice the last line that I'm recommending we strike because it'll be a fundamental change to that zoning district. It's always been worded that it was for 2-family and multifamily units.
Mm-hmm.
If we strike all of the ones about the ones that existed prior, then that's going to allow for multifamily units in the R3 districts. We've got large R3 districts. Today's world is leaning a little bit less towards single family and more toward, apartment living or something like that, smaller townhouses, multi-unit type things. And I think we probably should discuss that a little bit. And we may want to recommend that we make a change to the definitions about what multi-units we want in here, either in defining it in the code itself or in the definitions. Because I'm not sure we want apartment houses, big ones in R3, but I do believe we would want townhouses and duplexes allowed. Currently, they wouldn't be allowed to build a duplex even in R3, but there's duplexes everywhere in R3s here existing already. And townhouses and duplexes I can see as an issue.
So, Eric, can I ask a question? I'm sorry.
Yes,
Would,
ma'am.
so this would this be a density guideline or a building height and size guideline?
It's more of a density guideline.
Okay.
Yeah, well, you see here in the second sentence, the primary purpose is to allow land for single-family dwellings on small lots, two-family and multifamily.
Yeah, where before it was only the ones that were existing. Is it that older two-family and multifamily units constructed and occupied prior to the enactment of this ordinance. So what I'm proposing is we would be able to allow those in R3 as new construction.
Okay, but how do we define multifamily?
So I think we could probably talk to the city attorney, but I believe you can define it through limiting the amount of units per lot. So we don't really have density restrictions. In the downtown ordinance, you'll see that we were talking about how many units could be on a certain amount of land. So how many acres of land, how many units, that's kind of a density rating. And I think that maybe that's what we need to look at doing if we allow this in R3, is talking about the maximum density we allow per acre.
But I do think we need to look towards a definition of that and not just have multifamily. That's
Right.
pretty open.
Yeah, it's a little open right now, but that was meant to spur this discussion.
Well, that's my thought. I see the two-family duplex, whatever you want to call it, but I do think we need to reel in the multifamily opportunity.
So I'll make a note that I'll put together a recommendation on how to accomplish that before next month.
All right.
May I also interject, since we're looking at the diversified housing stock sort of need in the city, not just between the duplexes and townhouses, but potentially looking at, as we try to work on, hopefully possibly maybe rehab rehabilitation of some of our more dilapidated homes, that depending on the size lot, a lot of nonprofit organizations or redevelopment organizations will look at, let's just say, a large Victorian style home, like I'm sure everyone's familiar with Tammy Scruggs Duncan House, like the size of that, that then they equate that to being able to hold up to 4 to 5 units. So potentially looking at then when you're doing that existing infill that fits with the current character, when you're not talking new construction, might be a helpful thing to also have some guidelines or recommendations for.
Okay, so you're basically referring to adaptive reuse of the structure.
So how do we go at that, Crystal?
That's what I'm thinking. Do you base it on the square footage of a building and then saying that, let's just say if a private home is, let's just say 3,500 square feet, then it cannot have any more than, 4 units, so that someone's at least getting almost 1,000 square feet.
Yep. So the way I would recommend that particular thing be handled is in building code. If the building is constructed for more than 5 sleeping areas, it's going to have to be built to the commercial building code. And so in a residential structure, 5 would be the good number to put on a limit for an adaptive reuse, because it wasn't constructed to hold more than 5 people. And that seems true throughout our city code too, when we start talking about, well, we call them different things, but in today's world, they call them Airbnbs. So you can only have 5 of those in a residential structure, or you're violating the building code with occupancy. So those sleeping areas are where it revolves around. So I would recommend limiting to 5, because that sings well with the other pieces of code.
Another huge limiting factor is going to be parking.
Yes, sir.
You take a house like the Duncan house and turn it into 4 units. I mean, that's a pretty busy corner right there. where are you going to park? I mean, that, I don't know that that's going to be.
That's good. That's a great point. That's a good point.
I mean, we've discussed parking before, and it's a very sticky wicket. When we talked about density a couple years ago and combining some zoning, parking came up, and we looked at it like, I mean, you know, that parking thing affected me. I've got 7 vehicles at my house. You know, here we are. So you start looking at some of those properties, especially if it's going to be not necessarily a commercial Airbnb, but we know that those places can function like that. And then it comes down to, okay, where are you going to park?
Yep. And if I remember correctly, in our ordinance already existing that covers the Airbnb language, it actually calls out a parking plan if you exceed, and don't quote me on this, I want to say it's 2 or 3 units. It's there somewhere. And if not, I can review that. The lights keep going on and off, sorry. I can review that and let you know what it actually calls for now. But there are some, and the other way to go about it is if we don't like what it says, we can always put a section that refers you to the parking regulations. And we can always add in there a requirement for off-street parking for those uses if we feel necessary.
Well, I think we also have to take into account outside of the Airbnb type option, if we're talking dwellings, you're getting into separate sanitary facilities and kitchens. And are they going to have private entrances to each one of the units? And I've seen a lot of old big houses have been hacked up and outside staircases added here and there. And, you know, you can cram a lot of people into a relatively small place. That's the way it used to be in college towns, where you had 5 units in a 1-family house, basement, attic, 2 on the floors. And we just have to watch that we don't create some mix mash of who knows what with allowing too many units in a particular size. Actual residential living as compared to an Airbnb situation.
Yeah. And
so Eric, you're going to come back to us with a recommendation on number 1, this multifamily term, and number 2, the parking aspect of it.
Yep. That's what I've got in my notes to do right now. And so I'll try to take in consideration too and review and think through the codes that apply to that limit on a particular building. But like I said, if it's an existing residential structure, you can't alter it to hold more than 5. It wouldn't be feasible, I should say, to alter it to hold more than 5 sleeping areas separated from each other. Now the common areas, they can be common, but the sleeping areas have to be separated.
Okay, moving on, if we can. Moving on to Article 13, the floodplain districts. This was some riveting reading, as I was telling next Saturday night. It's pretty thick in there, but anyway, hope everybody made it through.
Yeah, I'd like to do a little comment on this one. This is actually pretty much striking tons of language that doesn't need to be there, the way that FEMA does the National Flood Insurance Program today. There's actually been recommendations coming from the state about how to update your floodplain ordinance. And we basically took out tons of unneeded language, and then we are adding in things that are out of the current recommended ordinance related to floodplains. And this was coming through DCR, Department of Conservation and Recreation. They promulgate that program in Virginia. And,
okay.
I got it directly from the state representative, basically, when I became a certified floodplain manager.
Okay. We're making our way through there. Anybody see anything in Division 1 that they have a question about or a problem with? How about Division 2? I had a question on D in section 2.1. That was on the basement. Any area of a building having its floor subgrade or below ground level on all sides. What about a split level?
So split levels are required, and you got to remember, we're talking floodplain regulation here. It doesn't relate to other things. And so in the floodplain management world, anything that's subgrade is what they define as a basement, basically. And so it doesn't, and the reason that's important is if you're subgrade and you're in a floodplain area, the finished part of that basement should never be finished, basically. So existing structures are there, but this is really what's going to prevent people from building something that's going to have a huge amount of flood loss subgrade in a floodplain district. So that's what it's meant to do. And this is a straight up definition from FEMA.
Okay. I know of split levels that are subgrade.
Yes, a lot of them are. And so you got to remember, this will only affect those people who want to build a split level subgrade finished that are inside of a 100-year floodplain, as it's commonly referred to. In flood, we don't really like that term. We call it the 1% annual flood hazard area because the 100 years kind of not really accurate.
Okay. Anything else that anybody pick up on in Division 2? I guess in Division 2's, I guess it's .0, flood proofing. Any combination of structural or non-structural additions, changes, or adjustments to structures which reduce or eliminate flood damage to real estate or improved real property, water, and sanitary. Who approves that?
So that would be myself. So as the floodplain administrator, flood proofing is one way for you to build a building in a flood district that normally would require you to be elevated, the structure to be elevated. But let's say you want to build a warehouse there, and so you need a slab floor on grade. There are products that flood proof this building's openings. So basically steel barriers that can be put in and removed. And that allows you to build that type of building in that area. If you do those flood proofing requirements, then you're able to build those types of structures there.
Okay. All right. So you would be the approving body.
Yes, sir.
Anybody else see anything in here about in that section? I'm sorry. How about over in V? In Y, for some reason, I circled travel trailers. That includes, that falls under manufactured home?
Yes, sir. So manufactured homes, that definition's changed through the years. Travel trailers were the original manufactured home before HUD regulation. So HUD now defines all mobile homes or trailers as manufactured housing. And so that's what the terminology revolves around, is the HUD definition. If I remember right, it was prior to 1970.
Okay.
Okay.
There was no regulation of trailer.
Hey, let me interrupt you all just a second. Mike, are you able to hear and talk back to us?
You're on mute, Mike.
I can't hear anything. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, now.
You can't hear me?
We can now that you took it off mute.
I can't hear y'all.
Oh, well,
Mike,
Mike,
do you want
your
me to call
speakers
you
aren't
on your
muted, are
cell
they?
phone so you can hear?
He couldn't hear you.
I know, he can't. How do you even, I'll call him. Let's see if we can help him.
Jennifer, check and see if his speakers by chance are muted.
I know, he
Yes.
can't. How do you even, I'll call him. Let's see if we can help him.
Jennifer, check and see.
whew. This is painful as the floodplain stuff.
Yeah, floodplain management is, it's very complicated. And FEMA instructors teach the floodplain managers course. And I was glad that I attended. It is a very complex world with a whole lot of regulation. And we're honestly way behind the curve on documentation. And so we're just trying to get ourselves up to speed is what's going on. The whole floodplain ordinance update is just to get us up to speed with where we should be.
Well, that's one of those things that, in my opinion, you leave to the trained professionals. You know, I don't claim to be, and I entrust those folks with this. It was actually kind of interesting to start through it. It got pretty muddy towards the end, but people are trained in this, and I'm not and don't want to be. All right, so moving on to the next page. Anything there?
Thomas,
Yes, ma'am.
so Mike has said he just kind of lost everything. He's went out and came back twice. He's listening on Facebook, but he can't do anything else. Have any suggestions?
Get him to go off and let me resend the link to him and try it again.
Okay, so we're lagging on your end. He wants you to get off.
Okay, pressing on through section 2 or division 2, what was it called? Anything else, guys? Folks? I did not have anything else personally in division 2. Now we're down to division 3, which is establishment of zoning districts. Again, I didn't have anything in division 3. Did anybody else? I'll go back to my statement. We leave this to the professionals. Division 4. I wish we had page numbers on here.
Sorry about that.
Anybody have any comments there?
So I think in this one, there's one thing I would like to point out, and I have to look to find it. But my recollection is that I may have inserted a recommendation on increasing the freeboard, which is the requirement for height above base flood elevation if you're building in a floodplain. And so if I remember right, and I have to find it, I think I recommended 18-inch freeboard, where currently today we don't have a requirement for you to exceed base flood elevation. And there's two reasons why I recommended 18 inches. 18 inches, they round by the foot. So if you go 1.5 feet, they're going to round you up to the 2 foot rate on your flood insurance. So you get a bigger discount. You'll get credit for 2 foot on your flood insurance if you're at least 18 inches above base flood elevation. So that's a cost savings. The other reason is all the firm maps, the flood maps for our area, they're based on the fact that when you get to the point where you've had enough development in the floodplain, that cause a 1 foot rise in base flood elevation, and they bank that this will happen eventually, then you're not going to have any development in that area. But today, if we're building at base flood elevation and somewhere down the road, 50 years from now, there's enough development that it increases that base flood elevation by a foot, your house is underwater now. So I was recommending that we go not just a foot above, but 18 inches. And that way you get the people above that 1 foot increase and rise that's potentially coming someday, hopefully beyond our lifetime. And that, you know, they'll get a credit for 2 foot, the discount on their flood rates for that.
And I guess going back to what Ms. Onitis said, you are protecting the people and also providing them with a way to build if they want to. So we're not discouraging it or precluding it. We still have a way to make it happen.
Yeah, and I'm trying to help keep the flood insurance rates in Covington more reasonable. So the more structures we have that are compliant with that, the cheaper people's flood insurance rates are. And so, yeah, when we're doing new construction, I'd hate to see somebody build it. They come through, revise our firm, change our flood levels, and then all of a sudden, where you were above base flood, now you're below and your rate goes exponentially higher. So I would much rather require a freeboard during the construction phase. You may have to put 1 extra course of cinder block or 2 extra courses of cinder block in on your foundation, but over the years, it's probably going to pay for itself again and again. And plus, you're not going to have to live through having your house flood damaged multiple times.
Okay, all right, I'm good with that.
The other question would be is if you anticipate that the base is going to move 12 inches, wouldn't it be better for the landowner to go ahead and go the full 24, and then he's got a foot of, then he's still got 12 inches of freeboard for waves or anything else, as opposed to just going 18 inches. That'd just be 1 more course of block.
That's what you're saying, right?
That's basically what I'm saying is I'm already, by inserting 18 inches, I'm asking them, or basically going to require them to build high enough that they're exceeding that 1 foot rise. Because when we get to 1 foot rise, FEMA's going to say 0 development in your floodplains. You can't build anything else.
And with them rounding up,
and
it goes to 2 foot.
Right. And then when you round up, you're requiring them to build that 6 inches higher than that cutoff point by FEMA. But by that 6 inches, they're going to get a discount on their flood insurance as if they were already built to 2 foot. So depending on the grade, they may be able to save a course of block and, you know, not be too expensive, but yet get a huge discount on their insurance.
What I was meaning, it not for the insurance discount, but the actual water. If it comes up 6 inches isn't much when you're talking about water flowing.
No, it's
And
not.
it comes up against the foundation and it bounces a little bit or waves around, you'll lose that 6 inches.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I didn't know if it'd be better just make it 2 foot and be done with it.
Well, you could. I mean, in coastal areas, some places require as much as 4 foot of freeboard. And so it's all a risk cost mitigation process, you know. And so we either increase the burden of the cost of the construction on the person doing the building and by having a bigger freeboard, or we kind of try to get them higher. And for me, I think of it as that 1 foot is where FEMA's going to say you can't build anything else. I want them at least a little bit above that. And if I'm going to require them a little bit above that, that 6 inches gets them that discount. And I'm not saying that we couldn't require 2 foot. 2 foot is just fine with me, but you're increasing the cost burden on the person that's doing the construction. And personally, I would like to see more new construction in Covington. So I don't want to make the burden too extensive to deter new development. But, you know, I do want to have a reasonable expectation of keeping our rates lower in Covington and nationwide. That's the whole purpose of a floodplain ordinance. That's the reason why if you participate in the National Flood Insurance Program, you got to have a floodplain ordinance. You have to do record keeping and all this stuff. So, you know, I'm trying to balance that cost benefit for the.
How much land do we have in floodplain?
So basically we're riverine flooding. So almost everything along adjacent to the river to some extent is floodplain. So I could kind of walk you through, but it's easier to refer you to a map. The easiest one and the fastest loading one that's pretty accurate is the Virginia Flood Risk Information System. So we refer to that as VFRIS. It has a really great mapping tool. It's based straight off the FEMA maps. It's not the regulatory one, but the FEMA one is really, really slow loading because there's so many people on it. So I would recommend you look at VFRIS, and then you'll be able to see and pay attention to the 1% annual flood hazard area. That's the one where these regulations really apply. They'll show you the 2% or, you know, and that's basically what everybody calls the 500 year, but these regulations don't really apply there. It's there for reference, but those lines can change when they come in and redraw the maps.
All right, good discussion. How about in Division 5? Let me see, I didn't have anything in 5. Did anybody else? In Division 6, anybody? In Division 6, it starts out a structure or use of a structure or premises must be brought into conformity with those provisions when it is changed, required, or improved unless one of the following exceptions is established before the change is made. A1 says a substantial repair. Is whose pleasure is the word substantial defined under?
So that's still for me. And what a substantial repair, substantial damage is actually defined in the floodplain ordinance. And if I remember right, it is 50% rule basically. I have to look and make sure I'm not telling you wrong.
No, if it is backed up somewhere, that's good. I hate to see terms like this that are relative, and one man's pleasure is not another one, and you get yourself into trouble.
Yeah, it is certainly backed up. There is a standard for what is considered substantially damaged or substantially improved.
Okay. All right, moving on to Article 15. Sign regulations. A little background on this. This is the second or third time this group has been through this. We've had things kept popping up that didn't fit in our eyes, in neighbors' eyes that had to look at the particular sign or drive by it all the time. So this is, in my opinion, Eric can comment on it. This is more of our due diligence to try to get us to a point that we can control what goes on within reason.
Yes, that, and there was a Supreme Court decision that really drove the need to do this. The Supreme Court ruled on a case that basically says that we cannot control content of a sign at all. So we had to strike everything that was related to the content of the sign. The only thing we can address is the size of the sign and the placement of the sign, the duration that the sign can be displayed. We cannot touch anything related to content.
Yes. Because that's one of my questions. I had it over here on Division 4. I had to comment appropriate content.
Yeah, we can't touch that with a 10-foot pole due to that Supreme Court rule.
Who does?
Nobody does. It's protected by your First Amendment rights is basically what they ruled. So I'm trying to remember the details of the case. I believe it revolved around a religious organization and their signs and their placement and the wording of a code in a locality.
Yeah, one of our former commissioners had a direct line of sight to the sign that was on the side of the Rayon Lunch for a while, if y'all know where that was.
Yeah.
A silhouette, if you remember. And that's where one of our revisions came from. But anyway, I digress. So you guys got comments here?
Yeah, with regards to the permitting process for signs, I'm still seeing a whole bunch of signs put up, modified, jabbed into ground, fastened onto a building. Where's the regulation on this?
So the permitting is actually, they're supposed to apply to the office. They were supposed to be reviewed on a 5-year period and renewed. And on that 5-year renewal, we go out and we look to see if the sign's being maintained, really is the purpose for it. The fee is very minimal. It's $20 for a 5-year permit. But the truth is, there is no documentation on most of the signs in Covington until I came into the office. I've never found any documentation on anything that was existing when I came.
And I hope you know that I'm not trying to point fingers or jab somebody in the eyeball with this, but.
And the little pop-up signs, the ones that people stick everywhere, those things are the bane of my existence, especially in election. Those are horrible. I've directed our public works and asked them anytime they were operating in an area and they're in the public right of way to pick them and just throw them in the dumpster because they're not supposed to be there. So, but yeah, they're an issue. It's really related to manpower, and so I try to utilize our public works department when they're working to help me keep those in check as much as possible. But I mean, I could go around once a month and pluck signs, and 2 days after I did it, there's signs where they're not supposed to be.
So you are implying that if I run a business, let's say Walmart, I've got to every 5 years renew my sign permit.
Yes, sir. That's the way the ordinance is currently written.
That's interesting. That was one of my questions, the business renewals, because that seems like a crock, but that's okay.
Could there be anything in the ordinance to help you on the pop-up signs? Like a $20 fine?
Well, the thing is, sometimes you would know who put them out there, but a lot of times you don't. So usually if it's a local business and I'm the one that plucks the sign, I'll actually put it in the trunk of the car and go to their business and hand it back to them and tell them you can't put it in the public right away. And if you're going to display it, there's ordinances that, just call me before you do something so I can tell you what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. And that's usually a good conversation to have with them because most of them honestly don't know that there's an ordinance about it, especially if they're having done business somewhere besides Covington first. So let's talk about our neighboring jurisdiction, Allegheny County. They don't have a sign ordinance at all. So a lot of people don't even realize there is such a thing.
But you get to be really good friends with those people going by often? Or you get the idea?
They usually get the idea. So, I return your sign the first time. The next time you're buying a sign because it's hitting the dumpster.
One of the things, Jerry, and I don't know if you remember this or not, one of the questions that we had to work on in a prior meeting about this, I guess, is a portable sign. Remember we talked about them in the back of trucks? You remember that? Would that be considered a portable sign?
So
Eric?
the portable signs are generally the ones you tow around that you can change the lettering on. They have the little arrow on top a lot of the time. So that's generally a portable sign. And if you set that in the back of the truck, there's a lot of back and forth about whether that's a sign or not. And some jurisdictions have even tried to legislate out the use of a vehicle as a sign, because some people will take a properly licensed truck, basically paint a billboard style sign on the side of the box, and permanently park it in an area where a sign would not be allowed. And so I'm not the attorney on that one, but we could have that discussion and decide if we want to try to ask questions on how we could prevent that stuff. But I know it's been a contentious topic in certain localities.
Well, I know that a sign in the back of a truck that was being driven through town at one time gave one of our commissioners heartburn. I could have cared less, frankly, and I still couldn't. So if anybody's got a problem with that, speak up and we'll look into it. But I don't recall anything. And as far as painting on a box truck, it's your box truck. I mean, to me, that's a hard thing to enforce and it's a hard thing to control.
Personally, I think if it's legally licensed and legally parked, you're probably not able to legislate anything.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think you could enforce it.
Yeah, somebody if it's an inoperative vehicle, there's ways to take care of it.
Right. Okay. Anything in the sign ordinance? Anybody else come up with anything? I see where over here in section 53, point G. I guess that covers the yard sale signs, right?
Trying to catch up.
What I'll call yard sale signs.
Can you tell me which section you're in again?
Section 53.
Several pages.
What?
All right, so I'm with you now. So
Section 53, point G, no person except a public officer or employee in performance of a public duty shall paste, paint, print, nail, tack, erect, place, or fasten any sign, pennant, banner, or notice of any kind within, facing, or visible to any public street or public open space, except as provided in this chapter. And I guess what I'm trying to ascertain is, first of all, you're not supposed to put it up.
Correct.
But if you do, please take it down.
Please. Yeah, and honestly, the power company isn't very thrilled with those types of things that happen too. Their linemen rarely climb a pole today, but that's the issue. If they need to climb the pole, then those things present cut hazards and stab hazards and all kinds of problems for the linemen. And so, yeah, the power company even frowns upon the use of their utility poles for that.
But in your opinion, that section could tell somebody, go over there and take a sign and you can't put it up.
Yes, absolutely. So the only way that you'd be legal to put a sign up is the way that's described in here, and that clarifies that you can't do it except for the way it's described in this code.
All right. Anybody else got anything there? How about section 54? 54 was another place where I had appropriate content, but obviously we can't talk about that. It's not appropriate to talk about appropriate content. Section 55. I'll bring that to everybody's attention. That is a great example of something you have to be aware of as you look at these applications for renewal or applications for changes in zoning or for land use. These illuminated signs, things like that shine light into somebody's home or out into the right of way, or are illuminated all night long and are obtrusive. Keep that in mind as you look at these applications that come before us. Anything else, guys? All right. Section 57, portable signs, anything there?
Got potatoes in?
Yep.
58, banner signs, 59, sales signs.
I'll turn the potatoes here shortly.
Huh?
I'll turn the potatoes. We'll have to interrupt, guys, and go turn my potatoes.
Go do that.
I smell something cooking. I just haven't made it yet.
I don't.
Anything else in the sign ordinance? From anybody? All right. Now we'll jump over to article, looks like 17, non-conforming lots, non-conforming land uses and such. We do run into this from time to time. So did anybody see anything here? How about Article 18, administration and enforcement? Thank goodness we don't have to administrate or enforce. One thing I'll call out in the administration and enforcement is section 8. Make sure that you read that and you're aware of that, because we do have special exceptions that come before us from now and again. Crazy things, or people come up with crazy stuff and it comes before us. So in section 8, anything there? Over in 8-2.9 area.
The reason we struck all that language there?
Well, I know the time allowed for permits.
Yep. So basically, we probably need to strike that line too, to tell you the truth, because the permits are generally, they legally, and this was prior to our current legal counsel, I was advised that a permit runs concurrent with the land and the use. So if the use continues to be in use and they're operating within the terms that their permit was issued under, that it continues to run with it, and that a renewal process was actually not legal.
That's kind of where I was coming from. I mean, if you read in here about, and I think I saw it in here about the proffers and conditions and things like that, we can drop the hammer on them, and we have.
Yes.
Keep your eyes open, because people think we forget, but we don't. The reason we put proffers, or they put proffers, and the reason we put conditions on it is to protect everybody else. It's not to their advantage. It's the guy that's got to look at its advantage or drive by. So, again, section 8, make sure you're familiar with that. We'll be back to that, I guarantee it. But as far as the permits are concerned, we used to make folks come before us on an interval, and I think it was 2 years.
I believe it was.
Yep. And make sure that they were compliant with everything. And then we finally realized that as long as they weren't doing anything wrong and nothing changed, it was a redundant process. And we realized that when the guy was running ponies up on Asbury Park. It seemed like he was standing in front of us every Friday and nothing ever changed. So we talked about the timing for the permits. So I would move that we strike that. All right. Then you got Article 19 over here. I don't see anything there. Y'all jump in here. I don't have anything else until we get over here to Article 24. Does anybody else? If we don't, then Article 24 is another part of the code that you want to familiarize yourself with, the conditional zoning. You have to be very careful with conditional zoning because some people construe that as spot zoning. So again, make yourself comfortable with conditional zoning, and you can talk to Eric or myself or Jerry or somebody, and we can talk about that. And also I would call attention to Section 2 of Article 24, down here under Roman numeral 7. You notice it calls out the comprehensive plan. You be very, very cognizant of that because that's like we used it today, and we'll use it over and over and over again because it is in place, and it's the biblical edition for us. Okay, Eric, I think that's all we got. If nobody else got any other comments on it.
That's good. Then I'm appreciate the input. I'll try to get those necessary changes and recommendations accomplished before next month, and we can discuss them next month and hopefully move these on to council. And I will plan for us to also go over the Central Business District draft again next month. So please take time to look that over again. And it is just a draft. So anything that you know, even if you want to comment before or ask a question before, please reach out to us. I'll be glad to discuss it.
Okay. Any new business? Anything coming next month you know of?
No, sir.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll skate through one. Any correspondence? Is Jennifer still here? She gone to dinner?
No, I'm here. No, I don't have any correspondences.
Okay. Having said that, again, fellas, thank you for joining us. I hope you learned a little bit today. I feel like I did all the talking, but
It's okay.
somebody had to, I guess.
That's why you're the chairman.
Well, that's why I want to get these two documents from in front of me. I was going through some things, and back in 2019, we started on this. So, of course, in the pandemic, it slowed us down, but I appreciate your patience. We made it through, and until we meet again, consider yourself adjourned.
Thank you. And take care, everyone. And great work.
Thank you.
Thank you.